If they had told me that one day I would risk everything for just one look, I would have laughed. Yet I now know that desire has the power to turn even the most devout woman into a silent sinner. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing, while for us, it is fundamental. My name is Elena, and until recently, my life appeared perfect in everyone's eyes. An elegant villa on the hill, a respected and wealthy husband, an orderly daily life that over time had transformed into an impeccable routine. I had everything a woman could want, or so I thought. Yet an emptiness grew inside me, something deep and unstoppable, an absence that became increasingly difficult to ignore. It all started with small details. Filippo, my husband, spent more and more time in the office, absorbed by work, often away on business trips. When he was at home, he seemed distracted, absorbed in thoughts that didn't concern me. He wasn't a cruel man nor even a bad husband, but something had died between us. The passion, the excitement, that thrill that once united us were now distant memories, dissolved into habit. Then Marcello arrived, young, just 25 years old, with dark and intense eyes, the gaze of someone who knows how to look inside you, beyond appearance. He wasn't the kind of man I had ever imagined would attract me, and yet, every time I met his gaze, something irrational shook me. He was our new driver, discreet and professional, simply carrying out his job without ever crossing the boundaries of his assigned role. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, his presence became something more. The opportunities to see him became more and more frequent. There was always an excuse, a sudden need to move, an errand to run, a meeting with a friend. Every journey became an opportunity, every moment spent with him an escape from monotony. Then, one day, something different happened. An ordinary car trip turned into a moment that would change everything. Marcello seemed to have read inside me. He perceived my loneliness without my needing to confess it. With a few words and silent understanding, he had breached my defenses. And so it was that, without realizing it, I began to confide in him. I told him about my life, how invisible I felt, how my golden house had become a cage. He listened in silence, with an attention that no one had ever given me. He was a young man, yet there was a maturity in his eyes that attracted me in a dangerous way. From that day, everything changed. Conversations became more intimate. Distances narrowed imperceptibly. Marcello was no longer just the driver. He was a presence, a fixed thought, a desire that grew inside me. Every time our eyes met, I felt a suspended tension, an unexpressed promise floating in the air. I told myself that it was only in my head, that nothing would happen. But my skin told another story. Then that evening came. The villa was silent, even emptier than usual. Filippo had left for yet another business trip, and I had chosen to stay at home. I didn't want to see anyone, or so I thought. But Marcello was there. I found him in the kitchen, intent on drinking a glass of water. Our gaze locked in an instant that seemed to last an eternity. There were no words to say, there was no need. The tension was palpable, dense, an invisible thread that bound us and pulled us towards each other. Without even realizing it, I approached. Marcello's breathing became slower, heavier. My heart was drumming wildly in my chest, but I couldn't stop. A slight contact, an arm brushed as if by chance, and everything seemed to explode. His whisper was a reminder, my name pronounced with a voice broken by indecision. But now there was no more room for doubts. When his lips met mine, it was like being overwhelmed by a warm and irresistible wave. It was fire. It was prohibition. It was the explosion of everything I had repressed for too long. The kiss lasted an eternity and a single moment. Then Marcello pulled back, his eyes wide, full of desire and fear. I looked at him, still unable to believe what had just happened. A storm raged inside me. My mind screamed to rationalize, to stop. But the body still desired, craved that forbidden contact. Words were superfluous. We both knew that we shouldn't, that we should ignore what had happened. But the tension remained in the air, thick like a sweet poison. I couldn't sleep that night. Closing my eyes, I could still taste his lips on mine, his skin under my fingers. Guilt tried to creep in, but desire overwhelmed it. I tossed and turned in the empty bed, trying to convince myself that it was just a temporary mistake, something that would dissolve with the new day. But the next morning, everything seemed even more complicated. The morning began like every day, with the housekeeper preparing breakfast and the gardener busy with his work in the yard. Marcello was there, near the car, looking down. Avoiding him was the only option, but he felt his gaze on him every time he passed him. The weight of what was unsaid between them made the air thick, almost unbreathable. It couldn't end like this. He knew it. After lunch, he decided to go out, to get away for a while. A tour of the city would have been the perfect excuse to distract his mind, or at least he deluded himself that way. She called Marcello to accompany her, even though she knew that being alone would only fuel the tension. During the journey, the silence transformed into an invisible battlefield, a precarious balance between desire and prudence. He drove. She watched the road without actually seeing it. No one dared to speak, but the unsaid vibrated in the air. Arriving in front of a boutique, she got out with a determined step, pretending not to notice the way Marcello followed her with his gaze. As he closed the door, he felt a light, almost imperceptible touch on his fingers. Perhaps it was his hand that had touched her for an instant, or maybe it was just the desire to turn and look at him one more time. But he didn't. After making some purchases, returning to the car, he immediately noticed something strange. Marcello was not in the driving seat. Not far away, he was talking to an unknown man. The tone of the conversation was tense, the expressions full of implications. Then the man handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper, which Marcello grabbed with a quick, almost furtive gesture, and then hid it in the glove compartment. Her heart raced. Suspicion crept into her mind like poison. Who was that man? What did that package contain? Was it possible that she was getting involved in something dangerous without even realizing it? Back in the car, she tried to hide her shock. Marcello behaved as always, yet something about him seemed different. Every time their eyes met, there was a shadow, a held tension. His presence, which had begun as a harmless distraction, was now turning into a dark and intriguing enigma. In the following days, curiosity grew stronger. The package became an obsessive thought. Every movement of Marcello, every fleeting glance, every prolonged silence seemed to hide a hidden truth. One evening, with Philip out of town, he decided to act. She asked Marcello to accompany her to a dinner, but the real objective was another. She watched him carefully as he drove, studying every detail of his behavior. When she dropped him off in front of the restaurant, she ran back to the car, her heart pounding in her chest. And now, tell me, what do you think Marcello is really hiding? Write your theory in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. He opened the glove compartment with shaking hands. The package was still there. He took it, took a deep breath, and carefully undid the brown paper. What she discovered blew her away. Letters, time-worn, but recently written. Every word engraved on those sheets dripped with tension, secrets, accusations. They were addressed to her husband. It wasn't about business. They were talking about something darker, something that could destroy everything. The last sentence hit her like a punch in the stomach. Don't think your wife knows nothing. Her blood froze in her veins. Marcello was blackmailing Philip. But why? What did he really know? How could he be involved in such an intricate story? The package slipped from her hands as she tried to get her thoughts back in order. His breathing became short, his chest oppressed by an invisible vice. He had to pretend nothing happened, at least for the moment. He put the letters back in their place with calculated movements, closed the compartment and sat down, trying to calm the frenetic beating of his heart. When Marcello returned to get her, he remained silent. He seemed unmoved, but she felt suffocated under the weight of the knowledge. Once upon a time she had given in to temptation. She had allowed herself to be overwhelmed by that forbidden attraction. Now he discovered that this man was hiding much more than a silent passion. He was a traitor, a manipulator. But to what extent was he involved? He went home without saying anything, but he felt his gaze on him. He knew. Or maybe it was just paranoia. The next day, when Philip returned from his business trip, for the first time he looked at him with different eyes. His granite confidence seemed to crack in the most subtle details. Quick glances at his cell phone, nervous phone calls, hands gripping a glass too tightly. The truth lurked in the most imperceptible cracks, and she now perceived every single nuance. He still didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain. The reality he had always believed to be solid was crumbling under his feet. He approached without making a noise, his heart in his throat and thoughts overlapping in his mind, creating an unbearable tangle. On the other side of the door, soft voices nailed her to the spot. A quick exchange, words whispered with tension. He couldn't believe it. It couldn't be true. The husband spoke to Marcello, his voice low but filled with an uneasiness that he had never heard before, and what she heard hit her like a punch in the stomach. He talked about money, about a secret that shouldn't come to light, about the fear that she might find out everything. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She couldn't fully understand the meaning of those words. But one thing was Elena. There was something much darker than she could have ever imagined. That night, anguish slowly consumed her. Beside her, Philip slept soundly, unaware of the turmoil that was devouring her soul. The darkness seemed even denser, the silences more deafening. The secrets were a weight on her shoulders, and she could no longer pretend not to see them. A few days later, when Philip left on a business trip, the desire for truth took over fear. He showed up at Marcello's with his heart pounding in his chest, his hands clenched into fists. He was in the garage checking the car, but the moment he turned to look at her, his gaze told her more than any words could have. He already knew the reason for his visit. He didn't even try to deny it. The truths unraveled like a tightly stretched thread that finally breaks. Her husband was not the man she thought he was. For years he had been leading a double life, hiding a betrayal that Marcello had discovered by chance. She had tried to make him pay for all the pain he had inflicted on her, but things had gotten out of hand. She felt herself wavering. The floor seemed to give way under his feet. Everything he had believed in, Philip's loyalty, their bond, their promises, everything crumbled like ash in the wind. Anger and pain mixed together in an unbearable tangle, while Marcello looked at her with an intensity that shocked her. There was something in his eyes, something different, dangerous, irresistible. There were no longer just words between them. Betrayal, desire, Suffering tied them in a tight and inextricable knot. He moved first, and she didn't hold back. The heat of his breath on her face, the hands that touched her with a delicacy full of tension. Every inch of her body screamed of wanting to forget, of wanting to sink into a pleasure that erased the pain. When their lips touched, it was as if everything else ceased to exist. The kiss, initially hesitant, became more and more ardent, more and more impetuous. Passion overwhelmed them with no more resistance, a fire that suddenly lit up and could no longer be tamed. He let himself be carried away, no longer thinking, no longer fighting against what he felt. That night, they both cheated. They betrayed their bonds, their promises, their very morals. But it didn't matter. In that instant, they were just two broken souls seeking refuge in each other. The next morning, reality hit her as hard as a wave crashing on the rocks. Marcello was awake, sitting next to her, his gaze uncertain, full of something he couldn't decipher. There was no need for words. What had happened was imprinted in their bodies, in their still labored breathing, in the silence, full of awareness. He returned home with a heavy heart, finding Filippo on the sofa, motionless, staring into space. He didn't even turn to look at her. She understood in an instant. He knew. Maybe he had always known. Their marriage, their lies, everything had already reached its inevitable denouement. There was nothing more to say. He left without looking back, carrying with him the weight of the choices made, the truths discovered, the betrayals suffered and inflicted. She had lost a husband, but she had also lost a part of herself. As she closed the door behind her, she felt free for the first time. But he knew that freedom came at a price, one he would carry with him forever. And somehow, she would get on with it. If you want to receive new videos of the series, write, "I want the sequel," in the comments. If you like the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive a preview of future publications. Thank you.